Today we will be discussing about the topic functions in C programming. Function means it is a set of code or a block of code to do a particular task. Code reusability and modularity are the two advantages of the function. That means if we implement a task using function, that means we are writing a set of statements to execute a particular task, and we are enclosing that particular set of statements in a block which is named which will have some name. So such a block can be named as a function. So by writing or by practicing like this, what is the advantage? Whenever we use this set of codes in between the program, that code can be used without rewriting it again. The entire code need not to write again and again. Just by mentioning the name of the function or name of that block, we can reuse it again. So code reusability is a major advantage of this function, and it supports the modularity because we can divide the entire task into subtasks, and each subtask can be implemented by using this functions. Okay, so functions can be categorized into two: predefined and user defined. Predefined function means we are already familiarized with this predefined functions because we were using this printf, scanf, such kind of functions we were using inside our program. So those were a type of functions which is already defined in the compiler. That is what is predefined. We don't have to define what should be done by this printf statement. That particular set of statements is already provided by the compiler. We do not need to define it. Such kind of functions, in such a way, we can create our own functions. So whenever a user defines a functions, that particular category comes under user defined functions. So we have to follow some kind of instructions to create or to implement a task using functions. So for that, we have three things. The first is function declaration, the second is function definition, and the third one is function call. So function declaration means it's what is the need of this function declaration? We were declaring the variables before we use that. That was to inform the compiler that this much number of variables, for each variable, this much amount of space is required, this much amount of memory is required, and the type of the data that is going to be stored by the variable. This will be informed to the compiler earlier. For that, we were declaring the variables before use. Such a way, we have to declare the functions before we use, so that compiler will be known that some functions are used here and it is defined somewhere. Compiler has to go for that function. Such kind of details will be provided by using this function declaration. Next, we have to define the function definition. Function definition means whatever the task we have to execute, for that we need a set of statements. That set of statements must be written. So that writing of set of statements to do a particular task, that is what is function definition. And next is function call. Actually, this function is defined outside the main program. Main program, we know that every program starts its execution by with main program. Whenever the compiler sees this main statement, it starts its execution and it goes till the closing brace of this main program. But we are not going to define these functions inside this main program. That means compiler is not going to see this function definition. So how can we make this function definitions known to the compiler? That is by linking this main program to the function definition. How we will link this main program and function definition? This is done by function call. So we have three parts for defining or for implementing a function. We need a function declaration before we use it. We need a function definition, that is set of statements to do the particular task. And we need a function call in order to link the main program and function definition, which is written outside the main program. So for all these three, we need some syntaxes. But here I am going to explain the syntax for function definition, and all the other details will be explained when I start writing the program with an example. So here you can see the function prototype. So here int is there. That means it is a return type. Next, we have to write the function name. We have to name a set of statements. So that is known as function name. Then inside this parenthesis, you can mention the arguments. So what is the need of this return type and what is the need of this arguments? Function is a set of statements to do a particular task. Okay, so to do a particular task, we need some input. So that input can be passed to the function definition within this parenthesis. That is what is arguments. Arguments means any input which is given to the function definition for the processing. Then after the processing, this function will give some output. So what is the type of the output, which is mentioned here in this return type? So here you can see the example, int heading void. Int means this is a return type of the function heading. Heading is the function name. That means heading is will have some set of statements here, and whatever the output, what is the type of the output which is going to be given by executing these statements, that is what is int here. Then here we have mentioned void. That means no arguments are provided, so that we are writing that as void. So let me explain this with an example. Actually, we can write the functions in 4 ways. So first of all, I am going to explain how can we write a function without using a return type and without using an arguments. So let me start with a program, with an example of addition of 2 numbers using functions. Already you know how to add 2 numbers or how to implement the addition of 2 numbers using C program. Now we are going to change that program. That means we are going to write the program using function, the addition of 2 numbers using function. So hash include stdio dot h. Okay, then int main. So then the braces are opened and closed here. In between, we are going to write our program. So I already told that when you write the program using function, the function must be declared first. So we are going to declare the function before this main function. Actually, main is also a function which is a mandatory function for every program. That means compiler is going to identify this main function and it starts its execution with this opening brace or with this main function. So before that main function, our user defined functions has to be declared. So I'm going to add 2 numbers without using arguments and without using return type. Okay, without return type and arguments. Okay, this is the category which I am going to explain. We have 4 different ways for implementing this function. So int main. So the task which I am going to do here is addition of 2 numbers. That is going to be defined inside a block and I'm going to name that. That is what is function definition. Okay, so usually function is defined outside the main program. So I am writing it as here. I'm not using any kind of return type and any kind of arguments, so that since I don't have any return type, I'm just putting void and I am giving a name add and I don't have any arguments here. So, and I am going to write the set of statements to execute the task inside this block. What is the set of statements here? It is just addition of 2 numbers. So first of all, we have to read the input, then we are just adding and printing this result to the screen. So before we read some input, we need to declare the variable. So for that, I need to inputs A and B, and for output, I am declaring a variable sum. Then scanf, I'm going to read the input here. So here the format specifier is %d because it is integer, the input is integer, and have to mention the variable names with its address. So ampersand A ampersand B, statement ends with semicolon. So input is read here. Now we have to add these two numbers, and I am saving this output to the sum, and I am going to print printf %d comma sum. So these are the set of statements to implement addition. Okay. But I already told that compiler is going to see this main function only, not this add function. So how can we make compiler not to this definition? That is by function call. So before we use or define a function, we have to declare that. So this declaration must be done before the int main. Okay. So void add. For the declaration, it is ending with a semicolon. For the definition, there is no semicolon. Okay, so declaration is over and definition is over. Now you have to call. So compiler is going to start its execution from here. So what has to be done by the compiler? It has to add two numbers. So this addition of numbers is written here. So compiler has to see that. For that we are using the function call. So what is the syntax for function call? First of all, function name. What is the function name? Add. Then parenthesis, semicolon. Now the function is called. So compiler is going to check whether there any definition with this add name. So compiler can see this add here. So it starts to execute these set of statements, and the output is displayed to the screen, and this compiler will come back to the statement, and it continues the execution with the remaining statements in the main program. What are the different meaning? Here, this is only required. So this is the program to add two numbers without using return type or arguments. Okay. So why we do not need arguments here and why we do not need return type here? When we read the input in the main program, that means instead of reading the input inside the function definition, if we are reading it here, the input is existing where it is in the main function. So that this input has to be passed from the main program to the function definition. Okay. If I don't have the statements here, I am going to, if I write these statements inside the main function, then add must have that input to process, to implement, to execute the sum is equal to a plus b. It requires a and b. So the a and b is where in main function. So that a and b has to be passed to this function definition. At that time we use arguments, and here the sum is printed inside the function definition. Instead, if we pass the sum to main program and printing this output here, then return type is required. Anyway, you just understand now. Function is a set of code to do a particular task. In order to implement this, we need to know about function declaration, function definition, and function call. Function declaration is to make the compiler aware of the functions and the return types and arguments. And we are writing the set of statements outside the main program, but the compiler is going to see only the main function. So that we have to link this main program to the function definition. So for that we are using function call. So when compiler starts its execution with the main program, and whenever it sees a function call, at that point the program will transfer the control to the definition of that particular function. Okay. Then after executing the function definition, it will go back to the main program again, and it continues with the execution of the remaining statements. Okay.